So you lived under a communist regime. Could you describe your life under a communist regime?
One word that comes to me talking about communist regime was uniformity. Uniformity not only in the uniform that you should wear in the school, but in behavior, in social behavior, in private behavior, in education, in limited options, and uniformity that would comply with the party line. And that sort of Homo Sovieticus that was created or was attempted to create to have a uniformity of ideas, uniformity of outlook, and uniformity of future for huge amount of population living in a huge territory was called Soviet Union.
So because of that uniformity and that policy, you felt stifled?
I think what we were lacking was a choice. And choice matter for every human beings as we are, we were born as free people or free individuals, and suddenly you are grown up in a limited choice society when things are predetermined for you, starting from education, what you have to learn, what you have to do, what you should believe into. It's not a matter of family education, it's a matter of state policy. That state was intervening from the very beginning in the early ages of how the students or kids should grow and what the adults should do and what they have to like and what they should not like. So I even remember a list of music that was okay to listen and the list of those groups that were not okay to listen. I mean, now it's a joke and I spread it in the Facebook as a joke, but I keep this document, and I have another document saying how you should behave on the discotheque, how you should talk and not talk, where you should laugh. I mean, you may be very surprised, but where you should laugh and on what you should laugh. Even on those kind of details, the party was trying to intervene. So it was limiting freedom, not in the sense of movement or visiting other countries, but it was limiting freedom of individuals on every single level and depriving individuals and groups choice.
Did you live in fear?
It was an interesting system when you start to feel that pressure, not in the beginning, because you grow up in the system. But then you start asking the questions, and then you start to be threatened. And first time I experienced when I said that I want to learn Hebrew, and I was told it's forbidden. And I said, why? And it's just forbidden. And when I started, I was one of the activists of Jewish, as they called conspiracy, I was threatened to be kicked out from the university, for example. And if not the Fell of Berlin Wall, I would be kicked out from the university. But they managed to sort of prepare the document, which was sort of depriving me education, for example. So that was the system was imposing fear. That was a system that was trying to embroider fear into the people's life. And when I look today to oppressive societies or countries that are trying to have societies like that, it is based actually on very, very well thought system of fear. It's not only fear of power, but it's sort of should be saturating every single cell of life of the human beings. Again, going back to depriving choice.
You're a physicist, correct?
Used to be.
But you're aware of Andrei Sakharov. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah.
Elena Bonner,
Yeah.
Natan Sharansky, and their fight for freedom. When did you learn about them, and through what media?
I still have radio receiver that my parents used to listen to Voice of America. And initially, I didn't quite understood what they were doing because they were not trying to engage me in that. I know that they were sort of getting into a dark room and doing something that appears not to be sex because they're dressed up. And then I discovered this receiver and the strange voices that were coming because, you know, the jammers were working very actively. And in private discussions that they had with our friends, family friends, and in those discussions, these names came up to me. And they were trying to keep me disenfranchised from this. And when I was asking questions, they said, later you will know, later you will know. So that was first time from my parents when I heard those names.
So you had this receiver. Was it illegal to have this receiver to listen to the Voice of Freedom? How did you manage to get information from the West?
So it was very limited, and these receivers actually, those who were working on short waves were under control, and we actually had a receiver which was then immaturely updated or upgraded to receive the short waves as well, because ones that you could buy in the shops were not the ones that could work on these waves.
Do you remember listening? Do you remember what the messages were or the stories were?
I was quite shocked when I first time started to listen, because I was sort of expecting to hear something horrible or expecting to hear something extremely outrageous, and I discovered the normal news. I discovered sort of stories from the life, bit different than I used to hear from official propaganda, and I discovered that there were things that my own government is not really talking about.
Did it seem that it was illegal? Was it something you kept within your family that you were listening to the Voice of Freedom, or was it common knowledge that you were all doing it?
It was not common knowledge. Of course, one of the reasons that my parents were trying to keep me away from it, that I would not go and talk to my friends about it, and the KG would not come to our house. So it was largely kept within the family, and it was largely kept within the very close circle of people, friends of the family that they were talking with. Later, I already tried to make it more wider, to widen the circle. And I was lucky in the sense that then we had an opportunity to have already Soviet Union crumbling down.
In the 90s, you were able to study in England and ultimately at Yale and here in the United States, correct? Would you have been able to accomplish this before 1989 under Soviet rule?
It was unbelievable. And when I went abroad for education, first thing that was quite surprising for me was the system of education, that you can actually challenge the teacher. Because in our system, a teacher was sort of carrier of the ultimate truth, of dogmas. You were never asking any question to teacher. It was a teacher who was supposed to be asking questions to you. So the whole system of education the free system of education was quite new for me and quite shocking, to be honest. But now I understand why. And recently, I was caught in a very funny situation when my child asked to me, who's 17 years old and choosing his colleges in U.S., he asked me, who was Lenin? And that was a shock for me because, I was grown up and forced to carry the portrait of Lenin even as my pin. Now I carry the Ronald Reagan's pin, but in my childhood I had a young Lenin there. And that was a shock for me that, my kid is so lucky not to even know who the Lenin was.
Isn't that fascinating? Thank goodness, right? Thank goodness. There was a recent open letter to the Obama administration, signed by numerous former presidents and foreign ministers of Central and Eastern European countries, decrying the lack of attention of the United States in attending to the NATO alliance. Their fear in part stems from what they discern is a belittling of issues of importance to their countries in the reset of Russian-U.S. relations. Would you agree with this concern, or is this fear overplayed?
I think fear is not only not overplayed, but my country serves as a concrete example of what the current Russian leadership is trying to do, how it's trying to reverse the legacy of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and how the current leadership looks at the state of affairs. It's not only a theoretical fear that we have, it's a very practical one, because 20% of my country is occupied by Russia. And it's the same people who erected the Berlin Wall. Same KGB is trying now to take a revenge to the fall of the Berlin Wall. And they are the ones who are trying to erect the new walls inside my country and to divide it in several pieces. So that's why I think, from my perspective, that letter is not only relevant, I think it should be multiplied in hundreds and millions of different pieces, and to reach every single decision makers in this country and in European countries, because that monster that was called the Empire of Darkness is trying to come back. And I think it should be stopped now, before it's too late.